The iron doors of the alien court opened with a deep rumble. A human man, wrists chained, ankles heavy with iron cuffs, was dragged inside by guards. The chains clinked with every step, echoing across the grand chamber. Dozens of alien nobles watched from golden balconies, their strange eyes glowing, their voices whispering. Most looked at the man with disgust, some with curiosity, none with kindness. The human's name was Kale, once a soldier, now nothing more than a captive. His clothes were torn, his face bruised, but his spirit had not yet broken. Still, he knew this place was not built for him. The court was vast, with ceilings like silver domes, tall banners of alien emblems, and guards in shining armor that looked almost alive. He felt small, out of place. But he stood straight, even when the guards shoved him forward. At the center, on a throne carved from crystal, sat the alien princess. She was young, her skin faintly glowing with silver patterns, her hair like strands of light. Her golden eyes fixed on him, sharp, curious, almost defiant. The chamber grew silent as she rose from her throne, her flowing dress scattering faint sparks like stars. Every noble bowed their heads, but she ignored them. Her eyes never left the human. Kale felt a chill crawl down his spine. He had faced battlefields, he had stared down beasts, but this was different. The weight of her gaze was heavier than his chains, and then she spoke, her voice ringing clear across the court. Her words were shocking, cutting through the silence like a blade. "You're taking me as your wife?" "Really?" she said, her tone sharp yet trembling. The chamber exploded in gasps, murmurs, and outrage. The nobles looked at each other in disbelief, some laughing, some sneering. The guards froze, unsure if they had heard correctly. Kale's heart stopped, his mouth dry. What did she just say? The princess took a step forward, her golden eyes narrowing at him. "You heard me," she said, her voice quieter now but full of fire. "You will stand beside me as husband." Kale's chains rattled as he stumbled back in shock. He wanted to speak, to protest. But the words caught in his throat. Why him? A human, a prisoner, a soldier who had lost his war. Why would an alien princess of such power declare something so insane? The council of elders rose in anger. "This is madness." One shouted, "A disgrace to the crown." Another barked, "A human is not worthy, not fit, not allowed." Their voices grew louder until the hall felt like a storm. But the princess did not flinch. She turned and glared at them, her voice like thunder. "My choice is mine alone. None shall question it." The guards looked uneasy. The nobles whispered, even more fiercely. But in that moment, Kale noticed something in the princess's eyes, not pride, not arrogance, but fear, hidden, buried, but there. Why would she choose him? Unless this was not about him at all. Perhaps this was her way of defying the council or escaping some unseen danger. The human lowered his eyes, his mind racing. If he refused, he might be executed. If he accepted, he would be bound to a princess of another world. Either way, his life would never be the same. His heart pounded, his breath shallow. The chains on his wrists suddenly felt heavier. Not just iron anymore, but fate itself pressing down. Then, as the council's fury grew louder, the princess leaned closer. Her lips moved, but her voice was barely a whisper, meant only for him. "Play along or we both die." Kale's blood ran cold. Her eyes flickered with desperation for a split second before she straightened again, her royal mask returning. The council had not heard her. The guards had not seen her expression. Only Kale knew what she had just confessed. The hall roared with chaos, but Kale stood frozen. Her words echoed in his mind like a hammer striking stone. Play along, or we both die. What had he walked into? A game of power? A desperate rebellion, or something far darker? He clenched his fists, the chains digging into his skin. The alien princess had just thrown him into a storm far greater than he had ever faced. And deep inside, he realized one truth. His fate was no longer his own. The nobles kept shouting. The guards waited for orders. The princess raised her hand, silencing the chamber with a single gesture. Her voice rang clear once more, calm, but unshakable. "This human is mine. From this day forth." Gasps filled the hall. The council seethed. Cale's heart raced, his breath sharp. The chamber felt colder, the weight of destiny heavy on his shoulders. He had no idea why she had chosen him, no idea what dangers lay ahead. But one thing was certain. His chains of iron had just turned into chains of fate, and there was no escape. The court was still buzzing with disbelief. Nobles whispered behind jeweled fans. Council members muttered in anger. Guards shifted. Uneasily, the alien princess stood tall in the center of the storm, her silver patterns glowing faintly across her skin, her golden eyes unyielding. And beside her, Kyle stood in chains, still trying to understand what had just happened. He could feel every gaze burning into him. Some were full of hatred, others of mockery. To them, he was a prisoner, a war trophy, not someone who could stand at the side of royalty. Yet the princess had declared him her husband in front of them all. The weight of her words pressed down heavier than his shackles. A council elder slammed his staff on the floor, his voice, like thunder. "This cannot be allowed. The crown cannot be tainted by such filth." Others rose in agreement, voices rising in rage. "An insult to our bloodline. A betrayal to our people. Remove him at once." Kyle thought this was the end. At any moment the guards would cut him down. But the princess lifted her hand, her voice sharp and steady. "My word is law, and I have chosen. This human will stand by me." Gasps filled the chamber again. Her defiance only fueled their anger. But she didn't back down. Her golden eyes swept across the council like fire, daring anyone to challenge her. And for a moment no one moved, no one spoke. Her power was not in her throne, but in her unbreakable will. Cale's heart pounded, his mind racing. Why was she doing this? Why risk everything for him, a stranger, an enemy? Then he remembered her whispered words. "Play along, or we both die." It wasn't just defiance, it was survival. But survival from what? From whom? The guards pushed him forward, closer to the throne. The chains rattled loudly in the silence. Kyle felt her eyes on him again, and though her face remained calm for the court, he caught a flicker of something else. Fear. He didn't understand it, but it was real. It was then he realized she was not just playing a game of pride. She was cornered, trapped by something larger. The eldest counselor leaned forward, his voice dripping with venom. "You dishonor your ancestors, child. You spit on the crown. You risk the empire for a worthless creature." He pointed his clawed hand at Cale. "He is no husband, he is nothing." For the first time, Cale's anger stirred. He had been called many things in war: enemy, prisoner, beast, but never nothing. He straightened, even in chains, and met the elder's gaze. "I am more than you think," he said quietly, his voice steady. The court gasped. The elder's eyes widened with rage. How dare a human speak in this chamber? The guards raised their weapons, ready to strike him down, but the princess's voice cut through like steel. "Enough," she commanded, her golden eyes blazing. She stepped closer to Cale, her hand brushing lightly against his chained wrist. To the court, it looked like possession, a claim, but to Kyle, it was something else, a message, a warning, or maybe even a plea. "Touch him," she said coldly, her voice echoing. "And you touch me." The chamber fell silent. No one dared move against her now. Even the counselor, fuming with rage, could only glare, his staff trembling. The balance of power had shifted in that single moment. The alien princess had drawn a line none could cross. Cale's thoughts spun like fire in his mind. Why defend him so fiercely? Why risk open rebellion for him? The answer still eluded him, but he could no longer deny one truth. She was not lying. Her defiance was real. Her choice was not an accident. Later, after the court was dismissed in fury and silence, Kyle was dragged to the royal chamber. The guards chained him near her private hall. For the first time, they were alone. The princess turned to him, her golden eyes softer now, her voice low. "You wonder why I did this," she said, her words trembling. Kyle stared at her, his jaw tight, his voice sharp. "You nearly got me killed out there." She nodded, almost ashamed. "Yes, but if I had not chosen you, they would have killed me before the sun set." Her confession struck him harder than the chains ever had. She wasn't just rebellious. She was in danger. The council wanted her gone, her throne stolen, her crown broken, and she had chosen him not only as defiance but as a shield. Her hand touched the chain on his wrist, her voice breaking into a whisper. "They think you are weak, but I saw you on the battlefield. You are not weak. You are the only one who can stand with me." Cale looked at her, shocked, uncertain, torn between anger and curiosity. He wanted to demand answers, but before he could speak, heavy footsteps echoed outside the chamber. Voices, whispered, angry and dark. "Kill the human tonight, end this madness before it spreads." Cale's eyes sharpened, the chains biting into his skin as he gripped them tight. The princess's defiance had painted a target on them both, and in that moment Cale realized her battle had become his. The storm was coming, and neither of them would escape it alone. The night after the court uproar, the palace walls felt heavier than stone. The corridors glowed faintly with alien firelights, but shadows lingered in every corner. Cale sat chained inside the princess's private chamber, his wrists aching, his body restless, his mind full of questions. He was not free, not trusted, yet somehow chosen as husband before the eyes of an empire. The princess paced across the room, her glowing patterns shifting like streams of silver, her face calm but her hands trembling when she thought no one saw. Cale studied her, silent at first, but finally he spoke, his voice rough. "You risked everything by choosing me. Now your own people want us dead." She turned sharply, golden eyes flashing. "And you think I don't know that?" She whispered harshly. Her tone carried anger, but underneath it was fear. Cale leaned back against the cold wall, chains clinking. "Then tell me why me?" The question burned inside him. He had asked it in his mind 100 times. He was a soldier, yes, but beaten, captured, humiliated. Surely she could have chosen another, stronger, noble, someone her people would accept. But she shook her head, her voice breaking low. "Because they fear you." Cale frowned, confusion mixing with disbelief. "Fear me? I'm their prisoner." She stepped closer, her eyes sharp, her voice trembling but fierce. "They fear what you represent, a human who cannot be broken, even in chains." Her words struck him like a blade. He remembered the battlefield, the day he was captured. He had fought until the last, refusing to kneel, refusing to beg. Perhaps she had seen him then. Perhaps that moment had decided his fate. Still, it made no sense. Why tie herself to him? The princess moved to the balcony, staring into the alien night sky, the stars burning like endless fire. "The council wants me gone," she admitted softly. "They want power, control, and I am in their way." Her golden eyes glistened as she turned back to him. "By choosing you, I have made them hesitate. They fear scandal. They fear weakness. They fear the people's reaction." She breathed deeply, her voice firm again. "And now, as long as you stand with me, I live." Cale's chest tightened. Not from the chains, but from her words. She had tied her survival to him, a prisoner, an enemy, a human in a world that hated him. He wanted to laugh at the madness of it, but her eyes, those eyes, held something more, something desperate, and he could not look away. A knock at the chamber doors shattered the silence. The guards announced a visitor, the High Chancellor of the Council, an old alien with skin like cracked stone, eyes burning with hatred. He bowed slightly to the princess, but his gaze fixed on Cale with venom. "Your Highness," the Chancellor said coldly, "this farce must end. Dismiss this human before the Empire loses faith in you." The princess stood tall, her silver patterns glowing brighter. "You dare speak to your crown like this?" she snapped. The Chancellor smirked. "I dare because the people whisper they question your judgment, and if you do not act, rebellion will rise." Cale tensed. The words were not just warning, they were threat. The princess stepped closer, to Kyle, her hand brushing his chain again. "Then let them whisper," she said boldly. "This human will remain by my side." The Chancellor's eyes darkened, his voice low and venomous. "Then you have doomed us all." He turned and stormed out, the heavy doors slamming shut behind him. Kale exhaled slowly, staring at the princess. "You just painted a bigger target on both of us," he muttered. She turned to him, her voice steady. "Then we stand together, or we fall apart." For a long moment silence filled the chamber, only the crackle of alien fire breaking it. Kale's mind wrestled with anger and confusion. He was no hero, no husband, no savior. Yet somehow this alien princess looked at him as if he was the only one she could trust. Later that night, Kale could not sleep. The whispers outside the door returned, hushed voices of traitors plotting. "Strike him down first, then the crown will fall easily." Kyle's body tensed, his soldier's instincts awakening. He pulled against the chains, every muscle burning. But then the door creaked, a shadow slipping inside with a blade. Kyle's heart thundered. He moved fast, using the chain itself as a weapon. With a sharp pull, he wrapped the iron around the assassin's arm, yanking hard. The alien cried out, the blade clattering to the ground. The noise woke the princess, her golden eyes wide as she saw the struggle. "Kale!" she gasped, grabbing a small ceremonial spear from the wall. Together they fought, the human with chains, the princess with steel. The assassin fell, bleeding, gasping, whispering, "The council will never let you live." Before silence claimed him, breathing hard, the princess stared at Kale, her chest rising and falling. He had saved her even in chains. She stepped closer, her voice soft, almost trembling. "You could have let him kill me, but you didn't." Kale stared at her, sweat and blood dripping from his skin. "Because I'm not your pawn," he said sharply, "but I won't stand by and watch murder." Her eyes softened, her voice barely a whisper. "Then perhaps you are more than what I thought." Kale looked at her, silent, torn between anger, duty, and something else he didn't want to name. The chains were still on his wrists, but for the first time he felt them loosen, not by iron but by choice. He was not her slave, not her husband, not yet her ally. But something was shifting, something dangerous, something real. And as dawn broke across the alien sky, Kale realized one truth. This was no longer her fight alone. It was theirs. A dangerous alliance had begun. The palace never truly slept. Servants moved quietly through long silver halls. Guards patrolled with sharp eyes, and the walls glowed faintly with alien fire. But that night, the palace felt different. Colder, heavier, as if shadows themselves had grown teeth. Kale lay awake, his wrists still bound in chains, the faint ache of the night's fight lingering in his arms. Every sound made him tense. Every whisper beyond the chamber doors kept his body ready. The assassin's words echoed in his mind. "The council will never let you live." Kale knew they were true. The attack was not the last, only the beginning. The princess sat near the window, her golden eyes staring at the endless stars, her glowing patterns faint against the dark. She had not spoken much since the assassin fell, but Kale could see the weight in her shoulders. For all her defiance in the court, for all her strength, she was still young, still human-like in her fear. And Kale found himself watching her, not as a soldier, not as a prisoner, but as something else he could not yet name. Finally, he broke the silence. "You should have guards you can trust," he muttered, his voice low. She turned to him, her eyes tired. "Trust is rare in this palace," she said softly, "and it is rarer still when power is at stake." Her words settled heavily between them. Kale shifted, the iron biting into his wrists. "Then you're alone," he said bluntly. She looked at him for a long moment, her golden gaze sharp, but sad. "Not alone," she whispered, almost too softly for him to hear. Before Kale could answer, he caught a faint sound outside the chamber. Not footsteps, Not guards, but voices, low and harsh, whispering in the dark. He stilled, straining his ears. Strike again before sunrise. She cannot live through the night. The human must die first. Cale's blood ran cold, his instincts sharp. He rose to his feet, chains clinking, eyes fixed on the door. The princess noticed his sudden movement. "What is it?" she asked quickly. "Voices," Cale whispered. "They're coming again." Her golden eyes widened, fear flickering across her face before she covered it with calm. She reached for the ceremonial spear again, holding it tightly. Cale pressed against the chains, pulling hard, the iron biting his skin. "Release me," he growled. The princess hesitated, her eyes locking with his. "If I free you, will you fight for me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Cale's jaw tightened, his voice like steel. "I already did." For a heartbeat, silence hung between them. Then she moved, unlocking the chain from the wall, though the cuff still bound his wrists. It was enough. Cale flexed his arms, the weight of iron still heavy but his body free enough to fight. The door creaked. Shadows slipped inside, 3 cloaked figures with blades gleaming faintly in the firelight. They moved like predators, silent, quick, certain of their kill. But Cale was faster. He lunged, chains swinging like whips, striking the first assassin across the head, sending him crashing to the ground. The second came at him, blade aimed for his chest. Cale caught the strike with his bound wrists, twisting, forcing the blade aside, then drove his shoulder into the attacker's chest. The third moved toward the princess, blade raised, her golden eyes flashed, and she thrust the spear forward, catching the assassin in the side. He cried out, stumbling. Cale finishing him with a brutal strike of his chains. The chamber fell silent again, the bodies lying still. The princess trembled slightly, her hands gripping the spear tightly. Blood stained the floor, the air heavy with iron and smoke. Cale stood over the fallen, breathing hard, sweat dripping down his scarred face. He turned to her, his voice low. "They won't stop, not until you're dead." Her golden eyes met his, wide, afraid, but filled with something stronger than fear. "Then I cannot stand alone," she said. Cale stared at her, his mind torn. He was still a prisoner, still, chained, still her unwilling choice. Yet she was right. He had saved her twice now, and deep inside, something in him refused to let her fall. The princess stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. "They will kill me if I do not fight back, and they will kill you because you are with me." Her hand brushed his arm lightly, her eyes searching his. "But together, maybe we can survive." Cale felt a strange pull in his chest. Not just duty, not just survival. Her words carried truth, her fear carried honesty, and her defiance carried fire. For the first time since his capture, Cale did not feel like a broken soldier. He felt like a weapon unsharpened, waiting to be used. The princess whispered, her voice trembling with both fear and hope. "Help me, Cale, not as prisoner, not as pawn, but as partner." Cale looked at her, silent, his jaw clenched, his heart pounding. In that moment, he knew his choices were gone. The council wanted them dead. The assassins would not stop, and the storm had already begun. If he refused, she would fall, and so would he, but if he accepted, everything would change. He finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "Then we fight together." Her golden eyes brightened, not with victory but with relief. And for the first time since the throne room, the alien princess smiled, just faintly. But Cale knew. Their alliance was more dangerous than any chain, because in the whispers of the dark, enemies plotted. And soon, the whole empire would rise against them both. The morning after the attack, the palace felt like a trap. Guards doubled their patrols, servants whispered, and the council spread rumors through every hall. The princess stood firm, her golden eyes burning with silent fire, but Cale could see the weight pressing on her. The assassins had failed, but their masters had not. By noon, the council summoned them both. Cale was dragged in chains again, though this time his head was held high. The grand chamber echoed with shouts as nobles filled the balconies, the council sitting in their high seats, eyes sharp and cold. The High Chancellor rose, his voice booming. The alien princess has shamed the empire. She has tied herself to a human prisoner, a stain unworthy of our blood. He pointed at Kale, his clawed hand shaking with rage. Let us see if this human is anything more than dirt beneath our feet. The princess stepped forward, her silver patterns glowing brighter. You will not harm him, she declared, her voice strong. But the Chancellor smiled darkly. No, Your Highness, no harm, only truth. Let him prove himself in the trial. Of loyalty. The chamber erupted with approval, nobles cheering, council members smirking. Kale narrowed his eyes. What trial? He asked under his breath. The princess's face paled, her lips tightening. A test of survival, she whispered. A fight that no outsider has ever endured. Before Kale could ask more, guards dragged him away. The princess tried to protest, but the Chancellor silenced her. If he is truly worthy of your hand, let him prove it with blood. The arena was carved from stone, massive walls rising high, banners whipping in the alien wind. Thousands gathered to watch, their voices thunderous. Kale was thrown into the center, his chains removed but no weapon given. Above, the council watched with smug satisfaction, the princess forced to sit beside them, her face cold but her eyes storming with fear. A horn sounded deep and terrible. From the gates, the trial beast emerged, a creature of claws and armored skin, eyes glowing red, jaws lined with jagged teeth. It was taller than Kale, heavier than any beast he had fought. The crowd roared, bloodlust filling the air. To them, this was entertainment, a human's death for their pleasure. Kale stood still, his breath steady, his body tense. No blade, no armor, only his fists, his mind, his will. The beast roared and charged, the ground trembling under its weight. Kale dodged to the side, the claws slicing the air where he had stood. The crowd booed, wanting blood. But Kale kept moving, every instinct from war screaming in his body. Find the weakness, find the opening, survive. The princess gripped the edge of her seat, her golden eyes wide. Every strike the beast made, every narrow escape Kale pulled. She felt her heart pound harder. She wanted to cry out, to demand they stop, but she knew the council would never allow it. This was their trap. If Kale died, she would lose her shield, her defiance, her hope. If he lived, the people would see a human rise above beasts, and the council's control would weaken. The beast lunged again, pinning Kale against the wall, claws tearing the stone. Kale grunted, shoving against the monster's armored hide. His strength was nothing compared to its bulk, but he had something else. His mind. He ducked under its arm, grabbing a broken piece of stone from the arena floor. With a roar, he drove the sharp edge into the beast's eye. The creature howled, in pain, thrashing wildly. The crowd gasped, some cheering, some screaming in anger. Kale moved fast, climbing the beast's back, his hands searching, his mind racing. He found a gap in its armored scales near the neck. With every ounce of strength, he drove the stone shard deep, twisting. The beast screamed, its legs buckling, its massive body crashing to the ground. Silence fell across the arena. Kale stood over the fallen creature, blood on his hands, his chest heaving. He had no weapon but will, no strength but survival, and yet he had won. The silence broke into chaos, half the crowd cheering, the other, half furious. The council scowled, their trap broken, their power shaken. The princess rose, her golden eyes burning with pride. She raised her hand, her voice echoing. You see now he is no prisoner, no pawn, no weakness. Her words cut through the chamber. This human is my choice, and he has proven his worth. With blood and fire, the nobles argued, the council hissed, but the people cheered louder. They had seen it with their own eyes. A human had fought their beast, and lived. Kale stood, shoulders heavy, blood dripping, his body aching. He looked up at the princess, their eyes locking. For a moment, the crowd faded. The council disappeared. It was only them. Two lives bound by chains of fate, now by blood. As well, the Chancellor slammed his staff, his voice cold with fury. This is not the end, princess, nor for your human. But his words were drowned out by the roar of the people. Kale clenched his fists, pain burning through his body. He was no longer just a captive, he was a fighter, a survivor, and now a symbol. The princess watched him, her heart trembling, her lips whispering softly where no one could hear. You are not alone anymore. And Kale, standing in the blood of the beast, knew one thing for certain. The trial was not just survival, it was the beginning of something far more dangerous. The arena's roar still echoed in Kale's ears long after the trial was over. The crowd had shouted his name, half in anger, half in awe. The council had glared with venom, but they could not deny what everyone had seen. A human, a prisoner, had killed the beast no alien warrior dared to face. Kale's body ached. Wounds, stung, blood stained his skin. He was dragged back to the royal chambers. But no chains held him now. The guards looked uneasy, unwilling to touch him as they once did. He was no longer just a prisoner. He had become a symbol. The princess entered quietly, her golden eyes soft with worry. She dismissed the guards and servants, leaving only the two of them. Kale sat heavily on a stone bench, his breath rough, his muscles trembling. For a long moment, silence filled the room. The air was heavy with unspoken words. Finally, the princess stepped closer, her voice soft. You should not be alive, she whispered, almost to herself. Kale looked up, his eyes hard, his tone sharp. Then why did you throw me to that beast? Her lips parted, but no words came at first. She looked down, her glowing patterns flickering faintly like fading light. Kale pressed, his voice low, angry. Tell me why. Why me? Why risk everything on a human? She turned to him, her golden eyes shining, but not with pride, this time with sorrow. Because you are the only one I trust, she said, her voice trembling. Kyle frowned, confusion and disbelief mixing inside him. Trust? You don't even know me. Her hands clenched at her sides, her voice breaking. I know enough. She took a step closer, her gaze steady despite the tears in her eyes. I saw you on the battlefield, the day you were captured. You fought when all others fell. You stood when no one else could. You were beaten, bloodied, but you never bowed, not even when defeat was certain. Her voice grew stronger, her fire returning. In that moment, I saw something I had never seen in my own people. Unyielding, spirit, a heart that does not break. Kale's chest tightened, her words cutting deeper than any blade. He remembered that day, the screams, the fire, the last stand. He had thought it meaningless, forgotten, but she had been watching and it had changed her fate and now his. Her voice softened again, trembling with fear. The council wants me dead, Kale. They have poisoned my father's ear. They want the throne, they want control, and I have no one I can trust, no one but you. She stepped closer still, close enough that Kale could see the faint glow of her skin, the trembling of her lips. You may be human, you may be my prisoner, but you are the only one who stood for me when death came in the night. The only one who fights without command, the only one who sees me not as crown, but as life. Kale stared at her, silent, the weight of her words heavy in his chest. For weeks he had thought she used him as a pawn, a shield, a tool. But now, her eyes told a different truth. She had chosen him not just for defiance, but because she saw something in him that no one else did. Her voice broke into a whisper, soft but sharp as lightning. You are the only one I want. The silence that followed was louder than the arena's roar. Kale's breath caught, his heart pounding. He wanted to deny it, to push her words away, but he could not when her eyes held nothing but raw honesty. He looked away, his voice low, conflicted. I am not your savior. I am not your hero. I am just a man who wants to survive. The princess shook her head, her golden eyes shining. No, Kale, you are more than that, you just don't see it yet. Before he could answer, a loud explosion rocked the palace. The ground shook, the walls trembled, screams echoed from outside. Kale jumped to his feet, pain forgotten. The princess gasped, fear flashing across her face. They've come, she whispered. The council has moved against me. The chamber doors burst open, guards rushing in, some loyal, some traitors. The air filled with the clash of steel, the cries of battle, Kale grabbed a fallen guard's blade, his body moving on instinct. The princess stood beside him, spear in hand, her patterns glowing brighter with each strike. Side by side, they fought. Kale's blade struck fast, sharp, brutal. The princess moved like fire, swift and precise. Together, they cut down the traitors, but more poured in, the chamber filling with chaos. Amid the storm, Kale's mind replayed her words. "You are the only one I want." The princess's confession burned inside him. Not a trap, not a game, but a truth that could change everything. As the rebels forced them back, as the walls shook with fire, Kale knew one thing. He could no longer pretend he was only a prisoner, only a survivor. Because in her eyes, he was already more, and in his heart, though he would not say it yet, he knew. He was already hers. The confession had changed everything, and the final battle was about to begin. The palace burned. Smoke curled through broken halls, firelight painted the silver walls red, and the sound of battle thundered across every chamber. Kale stood with a stolen blade in his hand, his chest heaving, his body still torn from the trial, but his spirit unbroken. Beside him, the alien princess gripped her spear, her glowing patterns blazing like fire across her skin. Her golden eyes fierce but wet with tears she refused to shed. The rebels swarmed. Soldiers loyal to the council. Armored and armed, Kale cut them down, strike after strike, his human strength driven by something more than survival now. He no longer fought for himself. He fought for her, for the strange bond that had been forged between them in chains, blood, and whispered truths. "Stay close," Kale shouted, blocking a blade and shoving his attacker aside. The princess spun, her spear flashing, piercing through another rebel. "I should say that to you," she snapped back, her voice breaking with fear and fire. They fought together as if they had always been one, Kale's strength covering her when she stumbled, her grace striking when he faltered. Step by step they pushed through the chaos, bodies falling, smoke rising, the storm of rebellion closing around them. At the far end of the hall, the High Chancellor appeared. His eyes burned with triumph, his voice booming above the clash. "Seize them both, end this farce, end this disgrace." Dozens of rebels surged forward. Kyle tightened his grip, his arms trembling but steady. The princess raised her spear, her voice ringing. "You will never take me alive." The hall became a battlefield. Kale's blade clashed against alien steel, his body screaming with pain but his heart refusing to yield. The princess fought with him, her golden eyes fierce, her patterns blazing brighter than ever. They were outnumbered, surrounded, but together they stood like unbreakable stone. A rebel's blade sliced across Kyle's arm, blood spilling. He staggered, but the princess cried out, stepping before him, shielding him with her own body. "Kyle," she shouted, her voice breaking. Her spear thrust forward, cutting down his attacker, her hands shaking. Kale caught her shoulder, forcing her behind him again. "No, if anyone falls, it's me," he growled, his voice harsh, but her golden eyes burned back at him. "You are not just mine to lose. You are ours to win." Her words struck deeper than the wound. Kale roared, surging forward, his blade flashing, his body moving with the last of his strength. He fought like fire itself, each strike driven by something greater than anger, driven by her. At last the rebels began to falter, their lines breaking. Some fell back in fear. Others dropped their weapons. The people had gathered beyond the walls, watching, shouting, their voices rising. The human, the princess, they fight as one. The tide was turning, not just in the hall, but across the empire. The High Chancellor snarled, stepping forward, his staff glowing with dark power. "You think you can defy me? You are nothing but a child and her pet." His staff struck, the ground energy bursting outward. Kale shielded the princess, the force throwing them both back, pain searing through his body. The Chancellor raised his staff again, rage twisting his face. "Die, both of you." But the princess rose, standing tall, her patterns glowing so bright they lit the smoke-filled hall. She raised her spear, her voice steady. "No, Chancellor. Today it is you who dies." Kale pushed to his feet, blood dripping, his body nearly broken. But he stepped beside her, his blade ready. Together they charged. The clash was brutal, staff against steel, power against will. But Kale's strike was faster, his blade cutting through the Chancellor's guard. The princess drove her spear through his chest, her golden eyes blazing. The Chancellor staggered, choking, collapsing. To the ground, the hall fell silent, the rebellion broken. The people's roar shook the skies. They chanted not just her name, but his. Kale stood, covered in blood, his blade heavy in his hand, his body trembling. The princess turned to him, her golden eyes soft now, her voice trembling. "You are no prisoner, no pawn, no weakness," she whispered. "You are my husband, my warrior." Kale froze, her words echoing in his heart. He had been dragged here in chains, mocked, beaten, thrown into fire and trial. But now, before an empire, she claimed him not as her shield but as her equal. He looked at her, scarred, exhausted, but alive. And for the first time in years, he felt something he thought he had lost. Belonging, he dropped his blade, stepping closer, his voice low but steady. "Then I stand with you, not because of chains, not because of fear, but because I choose to." The princess smiled, faint but true, tears glimmering in her golden eyes. The crowd roared louder, the empire watching. And in that moment, Kale knew. The chains of fate had not broken, they had transformed. He was no longer just a human soldier, no longer just a prisoner. He was her warrior, her husband. And together, they would face whatever storm the galaxy dared to send. The war was not over, but their bond had begun. And in the fire of rebellion, new legend was born. The human and the alien princess bound not by chains but by choice, husband in chains, warrior at heart.